Good evening and happy Monday to everybody. I appreciate your patience in getting this party started. As I said in the comments over there, tonight I was helping my dad with his men's apostolate, men's group that he runs, and because it's now spread out over multiple parishes, he can't be there to conduct the training himself, and so I was assisting him in recording some training videos. And with us being a half hour late, I don't have a rant to start off with. So the StreamYard link is in the comments. It should be pinned. And yeah, I just want everyone to know that this, in fact, is not related to the Trump inauguration. Um, so don't worry about that. And nor was I rescuing anybody from the belly of a whale. And that's really not good news right there if it's being super choppy, but we'll make do with what we have. I'm super choppy right now.
Your audio's bad. Usually it's your video. Your video's fine and your audio's choppy. At least for me.
Oh, huh. How about that? Let's take a look here.
Yeah, it's really strange. I'm like, why is this all choppy? Because usually it's the video that because it's a bandwidth problem. Usually it doesn't look to be a bandwidth problem. Your video is gorgeous today. Maybe Trump signed an executive order making the internet stop being choppy for you or something. I don't know.
Is this better?
Didn't try some more.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of Donald John Trump. What? Is that
Nice.
better?
You sound further away, like echoey. Different microphone
Oh,
for sure.
yeah. No, there's some of that going on right now.
Maybe it's picking up 2 or something. Who knows?
That is that better?
Oh yeah,
Okay, we've got our microphone situation sorted out.
excellent.
Well, it's about 20 degrees below zero here, but I hear that you've got a winter storm coming your way.
Yes, yeah, we do. That's what I heard too. Although I don't know much because I just got back from Reno, Nevada, so
Yeah.
it was cold in Reno, ah, but it was worth it. So that's okay.
Yeah, I saw the photos that you were tasked with holding the towel with which Ethan was dried after he got baptized.
I, yeah, Father Stephen was great. He was like, "Would you like to come up and help?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but yeah, it was very. Though they are the sweetest. Oh my goodness, are they sweet? What nice people. I mean, they were just great. The baptism was on a Friday, and there was a liturgy before that, and it was just so. We were there all day. Like I was there for had to be 6 hours. It's
Did
on
any of it
Friday.
stick?
What do you mean?
I don't know. Okay,
I've
that sounds like a no.
I've decided the 2 most important things, okay? The Catholics definitely have something completely nailed that nobody else has, and that's this crucifix thing, man. Like, that's super heavy power. But the Orthos have a very deep liturgy, and it just I was like, "Man," 'cause there's at least two liturgies going on at the same time. There's
Yeah,
all
so
this
that's interesting that you should point that out.
Yeah, there's all this stuff going on in the back, half
Hmm.
in secret even, and then
Hmm.
there's the stuff that you're participating in. There's probably 3, right? There's probably you could probably divide it into 3 or 4 pretty easily. But yeah, I found all of that fascinating, actually.
It sounds like you're kind of describing the traditional Latin Mass right there, Mark.
Well, yes. Vatican II really screwed a bunch of things up, and if we could just
Vatican II is multiple things. You need to be more precise when you talk about it.
well, you need to fix it, so I can't do nothing about it.
Okay.
All I can do is
Okay.
say, "Well, I know why the Orthos are getting all the people and the Catholics are still failing." It's kind of obvious, but hey, you guys do you. It's fine.
Well, we've got to fix these things slowly because they were broken quickly.
No, you've gotta fix them quickly because they were broken quickly.
It's a lot easier to break things than it is to fix them, unfortunately.
That is true. No, it was so Ethan was playing for me one of something that Pageau was saying on a podcast, which I had heard already, but he wanted to play it. I'm like, dude, I'm here at your mercy. You can do whatever you want. And it was this story about him and Peterson, and he invites Peterson to church, and Peterson's like, "You're a bad influence on me, but I'll go." And just the kind of goofing around you do, right, when you're buddies. And they go to the liturgy, and this is an Orthodox liturgy, and Peterson keeps taking his phone out, and Pageau's like, "What's going on?" And then Peterson interrupts Pageau to say, check this out. This is for my book. And he doesn't know which book it is. Like, is it the garbage book that he just released, which is total trash and no one should read? Or is it some further book that he's hinted at? I don't know. But he basically was the part he was writing about is basically participation in the liturgy. It is just so funny. And then that, of course, spawned a tweet from me. Like, the more you think about liturgy, the less sense it makes. The less you think about it, however, the more the world makes sense. And I had a bunch of stuff, and it was like all of these other things happen because it's all asymmetrical, right? When you think about things, it's so flat.
You've been thinking. What have I told you about thinking?
And then I finished Clockwork Orange, and what a catastrophe of a alleged book that is. And then I did get quite a ways through Peterson's Will You Wrestle with God? And I have no good news about that book. No one should even touch it. It is terrible in all senses of the word. It's awful.
Yeah, I haven't heard a whole lot of positive reviews for it, so I haven't bought it. I feel like it'd be another one of those, if you listen to enough of his lectures, you would have all of the useful stuff.
It's not, hey Ron, it's good to see you.
Hi, guys.
It's not, it's not practical at all. It's all super abstract, and it's biblical lit crit by somebody who's couldn't
Not
be
really
more
qualified?
unqualified. Yeah, but he couldn't actually be more unqualified. So, and at one point, like, it's ruined everything for him. So at one point, and I just, Father, if I could impose on you to put your materialist cap on for half a second here. If I were to ask you what it would take to, like, what you would have to see in the movie Pinocchio to believe that Pinocchio freed himself, what kind of thing would have to happen in the movie for that to be true?
Well, basically, we'll imagine that after having been created by Geppetto, Pinocchio would run off, even before wishing upon a star and everything like that, and would have nothing to do with Geppetto for the rest of the movie. Nor would he have anything to do with Jiminy Cricket, nor would he have anything to do with the fairy.
But you're skipping like 19,000 steps. What is the first thing that would happen in a movie if, well, just because the way Peterson describes it in the book, which is just terrible. I think I'm only like 20 pages in. I'm already ready to burn this thing. It's terrible. The preface is a catastrophe, but the first part of chapter 1 is already like just so bad. But what would have to happen? He just gets imbued with free will. It doesn't even matter how, right? Like, what scene do you think would have to be in there as a marionette freeing himself?
Oh, cutting the ropes.
Sure. Or at least like falling off the shelf somehow, or like is that in there?
No. There's a star and a little song about a star and a fairy. I think there was a fairy coming out of heaven and granting Geppetto's wish. I believe
So
that's how it happened.
Emanating from above.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
if
a
you wanna use it.
trade-off between the between the material and the ethereal, right? So he's controlled by material things, and then there's a wish made, and that wish goes up to a star, and that star conveys down something, and that something then magically, for lack of a better term, manifests as a quote fairy, right? And then that fairy sort of what would you call it, emanates onto a cricket at the same time as the puppet, right?
Yeah. That's. I mean, that's a really horrible way to describe it. And I feel like Disney did a lot better, but that's basically correct within the confines of the story. I'll just put on my little scholastic Catholic hat and say that, along with the, I think it was the Second Lateran Council, I profess that the human soul is created immediately by God at the moment of conception. Um, so as long as we're cool on that within the confines of the story, yeah, that's how of Pinocchio. That's how it happened. So,
But I did get a bunch of good notes out of me who wrestled with God, because I think this is a self-help.
me who wrestled with God and won.
How I helped myself. I think this is self-therapy for Peterson. I don't see any connection to anything useful for other people. It looks like he's done the quote modern philosopher, also known as sophist trick, where he's taken whatever he's struggling with, cast it into the culture, and is trying to resolve it there in a quote philosophical manner. But psychology is so individualistic. I don't even know where you get that reading of Pinocchio from, because his earlier reading of Pinocchio and Maps of Meaning was excellent. And this reading is completely wrong. It's not wrong in the way where you can see where a mistake was made. It's wrong in the way, well, that didn't happen. Where are you getting that from? But anyway, yeah. The book is bad. The book is bad.
Well, maybe if the book's bad enough, Mark, you should start praying that Dr. Peterson would find his way into the church.
No, that
I know
was
you've been.
No. That's actually, you guys do not understand what dangers you're into letting those people anywhere near your churches. To be honest, they gotta get fixed long before they get anywhere near a church.
How you doing,
Mark,
Ron?
Everything worse.
Hi guys, that was funny. Mark, do you need an inner healing? Are you okay?
I don't need anything. I'm great.
Well, I did that one. Just that comment, that was funny. I liked it.
Good.
It was
I'm glad.
I was
I'm
like,
glad.
I didn't know.
I wish the Orthodox Church is in for a big shock. Let me tell you that. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, because at least for Tammy Peterson, I think she's got the coolest testimony. And
yeah,
as much as I was going to ask you guys about Jonathan Pageau's brother.
Sure.
Yeah. But I'll circle, so I'm going to ask about his book and what you guys think about him. And also, I like Jonathan. I like them both. But,
the one I'm doing a book club on, Ron? Is that the one you want to know about?
Yeah, I guess that might be the one there, Mark.
There's a whole book club on it.
Well,
we're not done yet, because we're never going to get finished, because we're doing like a chapter a week.
Right.
We're really tiny chapters, you guys. Come on. Look at how quickly we got through Moby Dick.
Well, that's what's disappointing. We get through Moby Dick quicker than, but this is so. Yeah, that was another mistake that Peterson made. I'm such an obvious mistake. He was, but I have such good notes in here. I'm like, oh, you guys don't understand that non-hierarchical order is called sequence, and you keep putting things in sequence and saying hierarchy. You morons. Vertical causality is hierarchy. Sequence is ordering on the horizontal, and I'm like, these are the problems you're having with your thinking. This is atrocious. He talked about the restricted bandwidth of language, and I was like, dude, the first language was pictorial. Like, I don't. Peterson, he's completely off the rails. I'm like, bro, you need to learn some history.
If I can, because I don't know anything about Pageau, and I don't Do you think
Pictorial.
what? I'm sorry.
Pictorial.
Yeah,
The problem with this book, the reason why it
Yeah.
takes so long to go through is because of the damn pictures and their implications. It's
Yeah.
just so because the text is irrelevant in this text. It
What do you
doesn't
mean?
do much. I mean,
No,
it's
I
good
and I,
for certain people.
Yeah,
but
no, you kind of have to read it, Ron.
okay.
I read my way through it, and my conclusion is like, well, you just look at the pictures, and that tells you everything that you need to know. The reading is just there because you can't publish a picture book for adults.
but it's a good bridge for fundamentalists. And I would say that
Really?
the primary problem with Protestantism is that almost all Protestants are fundamentalists. Like they really like
Now, what do you mean by
propositions and facts.
fundamentalists? Because that word's got all sorts of valences.
Yeah, but fundamentalists follow texts. And so like
Right.
all the scientism people are fundamentalists. And like it doesn't really work so well unless you've seen it, but like on Clubhouse, I mean I've seen it many times. But on Clubhouse I found like the perfect example. I can't remember the guy's name on Clubhouse, and I wouldn't call him out anyway, but like he bragged about how he was in a fundamentalist Protestant cult of some nature, right? One of their pagan heretical cults. And then what happened was he flipped into just science defending constantly. And he was terrible at it because he didn't know any actual science. But he was like totally scientism. He was totally like hardcore. No, this is what physics says, and it doesn't say anything else. And it's like, no, bro. And fundamentalists always go legalistic, always, because they only have propositions to deal with. They don't deal symbolically at all, basically, or very little. And that's actually what that's the hallmark of fundamentalism, is this reliance on a text, or maybe not a specific text, but a propositional interpretation of something. That's really where fundamentalism comes in. And there's varying degrees of it for sure, but
Would that be dogma?
no,
Okay.
Dogma's great. Like you need dogma. Dogma's
Well, no,
awesome.
and I'm trying to.
It's
Okay.
more like the way that you're using these things, right?
Right.
It's sort of like, so, Ron,
Yeah.
would there ever be a time where you should run a red light?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, right. Like
Absolutely.
sometimes
Sure.
there's a time to run a red light, right? Like it's
Yeah.
icy and there's a semi truck behind me, and I don't think the semi truck's going to stop in time. Even if I do, I'm just going to blast through this red light, and like there's a little bit of squeeze between when the light turns red and when that
Right.
light turns green. And this is
Okay.
actually the safer thing to do. Right?
Emergency vehicle.
Right.
Emergency vehicles should blast right through red lights, right?
Yep.
So the sort of rigidity that Mark is pointing at is like, nope, never run a red light. There's
It's-
never an okay. This is a
And-
universally applicable rule. And universally applicable rules are very often only used correctly in the negative, right? So
Right.
it's never a good idea to be unfaithful to your wife. There's never a time to apply that, right? And you can always, like, the default setting is to just not be to not do something. So that's where you can get usefully universal, negative moral norms can be usefully universalized like that. But once you start trying to do it with positive moral norms, right? Like feed the hungry. Well, that's a good thing to do.
Mhm.
Do you have to feed the hungry 24 hours a day? No, you have to have a little bit of judgment in that. And okay, like here's my capacity to do that, and here's how I'm going to participate in it. And I'm also going to like sleep and attend to all of my other duties. And you got to juggle and balance those things.
Yeah.
Well, it's
So,
dogma versus being dogmatic, right? And so everybody needs dogma, and there's nothing wrong with dogma. But being
Okay.
dogmatic is bad, because what you're doing is you're only using words to interpret something, and that universalizes it, because you can't squish something into language, and that's what language is, a compression algorithm, right? You can't squish something into language and then do an exceptions list, because the exceptions are too long. That's effectively, and it makes much more sense if you're programming. You've been programming for more than 10 years. You'll get it right. Like, oh yeah, of course, right? Like that just means you need better design, effectively, or you need to constrain your problem better.
So the
That's
propositions,
the issue.
because I'm trying to learn Because there's someone from, anyhow, I know someone who's always going on about propositions and how they don't like them. And I'm like,
They're useful, but they have to be, they're tools that need to be appropriate to the job at hand.
Right.
Right. So when I'm on my YouTube channel, right, and people are, "Oh, Father, what are you doing here?" I say, I'm trying to manifest the riches of the Catholic intellectual tradition,
mhm,
because that's about the only thing that we can get through the webcams and the microphones.
right.
Like there's a lot of other things that I can do. I can perform sacraments for people. I can sit and listen and offer counseling. Um,
Mhm.
I can give them a tour of a church and explain how things work. All these sorts of things that I could do, but like a lot of those, like the counseling thing, that's best done one-on-one, no webcams. And sacraments, as a rule, cannot be done without physical presence, with one very odd, notable exception, but don't worry about that. And yeah, so it's yeah. So anyway, I can communicate the Catholic intellectual tradition using words,
Mhm.
and it won't completely ruin it, although you'll be missing out if you're not participating in the prayers in the liturgy that actually give
Mhm.
life to the whole thing.
Mhm.
But you'll get a taste of it, you'll get a sense of it. So if you're using your propositions carefully and you're using it for the appropriate things, you'll be fine. But it's when propositions are made to carry the weight of the entire
Can you give
universe.
me an example so I can learn? Can you give me an example of one good, one bad, just so that I can just, of a proposition?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And propositions are just words. So, for example, what Father just described, and see, this is where this is where Peterson's problem is in particular. You can see it real clear in the new book, which is My Wrestle with God. Uh, what he does is every statement he makes is from one quote individual perspective
Mhm.
out into the world.
Okay.
Okay. So when Father was describing, I can give you propositions, right? But unless you participate in the liturgy, let's go the other way around. So I was in Reno. I flew out on Thursday, which is basically flying all day. It's flying all day, right? Because the time zone changed. Like I lose 3 hours and everything. It's crazy, right? And then I attend this baptism. Now, I could maybe, if I could remember it, and I can't quite correctly, we'll say, like I can't remember it well enough to put it in propositions, but in theory, I could give you all the propositions that happened, and that
Oh.
wouldn't convey anything about the experience at all.
Mhm.
Because if you try to take the experience, and language is compression, compress it into propositions, all the good stuff's gone. All of it. It's all completely
Mhm.
gone. I mean, I could talk about the honor and the joy and all the shock because, like, they let me up in an Orthodox church onto the part where they do a lot of their work, not all of it, right?
The
Some of it's in
sanctuary,
Latin.
using the sanctuary.
I don't want to use this stupid Christian language. I don't know. That's no good. And then they let me actually participate as a non-member of the church, not Orthodox anywhere in the world ever, right? Not lapsed Orthodox, not right,
Mhm.
not even doesn't even live in the state, and they
Mhm.
let me participate, which I thought was I don't even know what to say. I don't have anything to say about. I don't know what the hell's going on, right? And I can't convey it in words, and that's why people don't like propositions, sometimes, and fair enough. But most people don't like propositions either because they're being used legalistically or they're being heard legalistically. Different
Mhm.
problem, right? Or because they feel like those propositions determine the world, right? Like you
Yeah,
could you could be
I'm tracking with
now
this.
you could be a now former president who just puts out a statement saying we have amended the Constitution and now you must follow this because it's the letter of the law or whatever. And those are propositions. And if you thought that was a real thing that had to be adhered to somehow, which it absolutely is not, then you could feel oppressed by that, right? But it's like I said on Vanderklay's channel once, or probably more than once, but I forget which interview I did with him. I basically described him. I said, yeah, I was going here, and there's these little signs by the side of the road. They have numbers on them. I have no idea what they mean, right? Because of course I kind of ignore those signs occasionally, especially in my little sporty convertible. Not that the sporty convertible does it, although I do blame the car all the time and not myself, because I'm not an agent. It's the machine. Just like Kings North says, it's the machine. It's not me. Might be a hint there. Yeah. So it's not symmetrical, right? Like propositions can show you the way, which is how the Catholics describe dogma, by the way. Dogma is like these little tiny lamps along the path, right? It's not something you're tethered to for your whole life. And the dogmas that you need to adhere to may change on your condition. That's why there's more than one of them. Like that's part of how it works. And it's interesting that we sort of stumbled across that, years ago now, in our researching on dogma. It's a very different way of thinking about the world. Like you need these handholds, and they need to be available all the time, and so they don't change. But you don't need some of the, like, once the proposition of the dogma is properly integrated into your being, you don't need to go back to it, right? Because you've progressed.
Yeah, and that's a super important thing for people who are priests and ministers to have pretty well settled. Hello, Bruce. Is like the most useful thing, and the thing that I still love whenever PVK gets going on it is talking about the providence of God and the care that God has for each and every single one of his creatures. And that's the best stuff. When PVK just gets up and starts preaching, man, I'm ready to put my hands up, ready to do some very non-Catholic things. But it's all good because it's really important that your ministers, your pastors, and your preachers especially have a very strong sense of, yeah, God really is in charge, and I'm part of it. And I'm participating in this, and you are too. And then, I've got all these Bible stories kind of queued up back here about all the tough stuff that people in the Bible had to go through. I've got saint stories queued up back there as well, and maybe one of them is going to be, or maybe it's just pointing at the cross, but to be able to do that, and then at that point, you're no longer like concerning yourself. I don't know. So dogma, Mark's using the word dogma in a Mark kind of way, and the Catholic definition of a dogma is a doctrine that has been revealed by God and has been declared by the church to have been revealed by God. So that's and is therefore infallible. So that's the way Catholic theology uses it. You can see how it so I don't know if that God's providence ordering all things has ever been declared dogmatically, but it's certainly a scriptural doctrine. Like it doesn't even need to be declared dogmatically. But
it declares itself.
Go ahead, Ron.
Well, the reason I brought it up, there's someone who I like that I don't understand too much, but I'm trying. They use the tyranny. It's a propositional tyranny. They would use that expression. And I've been trying to get my mind around it. So that's why
Vervaeke uses that a lot.
I'm sorry?
Vervaeke uses that a lot. And the way I parse all this, Ron, is the thing that John Vervaeke is referring to specifically is this is why John's super useful. If you can use this stuff, is the age of gnosis, right? That's what he's referring to, which is knowledge as propositions as the highest value, right? And
knowledge
you see this
as proposition as knowledge as proposition All right, I'm saying it. I don't know. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
As the highest value. So you actually kind of see this with Peterson especially, but like almost everybody right now. We're trapped in the age of gnosis. When people use the term modernity, think about the age of gnosis because it's much easier.
Okay.
I'll get the Substack article out soon. I actually have it mostly written too. I just have to edit it. But I was busy I've been busy the past couple of days. So
busy with useful things. Yes, it happens.
much
it's even worse.
Much more useful.
It's even worse in the era we're in because of the Wikipedia lifestyle we kind of live.
Yeah.
Where people know a little about a lot. That is brutally anemic. But because knowledge is the highest value, they feel they kind of get a sense of unearned moral superiority or intellectual superiority, but an anemic version of that. And so you have when propositions rule the world and you have a Gnostic sort of version of things with a small amount of it, like a very tiny amount, it's much worse. And so when you scratch that surface just a little bit, it reveals it's scratching about as much as you would scratch off a lottery ticket. That's all you really need to scratch. And then it reveals a lot about the character of the person because their depth is so minimal, so surface.
That explains like a lot of the insanity around the AI models, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like we're creating these knowledge gods that have all of the knowledge programmed into the grand, divine, large language model.
AI magisterium, man.
That's why. That's exactly why, because it's age of gnosis. So Peterson talks about this. He talks about. Let me just refer to my notes real quick.
Do you remember that bit where he was talking about his AI Nietzsche model?
Yeah.
He was super excited about that.
Yeah, he brings it up. Well, and he says,
what could go wrong?
He says like, God is dead, and we killed him because Nietzsche says so. And it's like, well, the problem with Nietzsche is he's an idiot and he's wrong. Like it's not that hard. Like he just says a bunch of stuff that can't possibly be true, and people go along with it because he says other stuff that is definitely correct, but also kind of obvious and not really all that interesting. And this is the problem. Like Peterson's like, you can start to understand the connections between things by mapping. I mean, he talks about this mapping language mathematically, and I'm like, well, AIs are not doing that at all.
Yeah, he said that to Bishop Barron too, right? He was super excited about like AI statistical models,
right?
Studying theological language, and it's like, because we use good and powerful for God to describe God the most, that means that God is good and powerful. It's like you got this backwards, my friend.
It's two errors, right? One is thinking that you can map language onto math. That's a further compression, by the way. So you're going to lose everything at that point. The funny part for me is like, had he done any research, he would know this because this has been tried dozens of times. Dozens. It just doesn't work at all, ever. It's never worked. Everybody who's tried it has failed. Far smarter people than you're aware of in the world have tried this and failed.
Well, if I'm... Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I didn't mean to...
Let me just finish one other point and then, right? So, but the bigger error is in thinking that somehow this is a breakthrough. Like, so this is the age of gnosis. Well, look, we'll be able to use math to map language, and that will, I don't know what he's looking
solve
for,
it all.
Really.
Yeah.
Resolve something.
Reveal God.
Bring him to God. Bring everybody to God. Understand God, Jesus. I don't like resolve the Trinity. Like he, maybe it's stated later in the book, but like he hasn't stated it yet. Like what? Why do you think this is significant? But he does, and I think that's the age of gnosis, right? Like, we can now put language in computers, and that solves a problem.
See you, Ron.
We were helpful, Ron.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, it does definitely.
Well, I had We Who Wrestle with God. I got that as a gift for Christmas. You two, Bruce and Mark. Yeah, Father Eric, would you not recommend that as good theological Is that gonna?
Oh, the
Yeah.
There's a lot of
theology's
scriptures and
terrible.
stuff he does, but is
Oh,
that
wait,
kind
hold
of
on.
like the devil in disguise?
It's the worst. It's the worst.
For
biblical
example,
literature possible.
I watched the old Exodus series that he did, the 16 hours,
stuff.
which it was very insightful though. They did get, but then I had pointed out to me, why are Catholics or Christians learning theology from secularists? And I said that's a very good
Well,
point.
I will say this. Well, sorry. Go ahead, Father Eric. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so there's one nice thing about Dr. Peterson that makes him good for baby's first symbolism, right? And if you're completely, you know, trapped in the age of gnosis way of thinking, where you're not accustomed to understanding things liturgically, symbolically, those connections, Dr. Peterson gives you baby's first symbolism, and it usually works out okay because his Darwinist approach to things is going to make sure that his symbolism at least works once, you know. So when he makes a connection between Cain and the Columbine school shooters, right? It's like that's probably a pretty good connection right there. There's probably something to that, and we can benefit from it. But you know, oops, sorry about that.
I was doing this because
Yeah, it's all good. It's all
Yeah,
good.
that's fair. That's fair. That's a good point.
So he's really helpful, and that's why, you know, I'm okay promoting his signal sometimes. Is for like people who are coming out of a very materialistic Gnostic kind of frame into Christianity, it can help them to start to get into the deeper things. But the deeper things are going to be much more safely and consistently delivered to you by Bishop Barron, by the fathers of the church, probably your local pastor too.
There's still a gap, right? And this is my problem. Like Pastor Paul Vanderklay is dead on about this. It couldn't be more right. It's probably his most insightful thing. There's a gap between Peterson and those deeper things.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Peterson that people don't understand is how small a step it is because of how far people are back from the symbolism. Father, I'm totally stealing baby's first symbolism from you, man.
Yeah.
That is genius. That is absolute genius.
Baby's first
Yeah, I'm going to
symbolism.
definitely steal that. Because it's baby steps, and it is a baby step. And it's so important because Bishop Barron can't make that step for you at all. Because he'll go straight to tohu abohu or whatever else.
Yeah.
Crazy Christian. It's not just a language problem.
Subsistence. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, it's not just a language problem, right? There's a conceptual framework that's missing. That's why recently, right, Peterson said, well, yeah, I kind of suppose that God and Jesus is the same thing, right? Or that Jesus is God or whatever nonsense he spewed. And everyone went like, yes. And I'm like, guys, this doesn't change anything at all. He's just as far away as he was before. It just doesn't, it's not going to move the needle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At all.
Yeah. I would say, as far as reading his book goes, I would say it's novel, just for historical purposes. It's essentially neo-Orthodox thinking in eisegesis, which is the Bardian school of Orthodox, which is essentially a postmodern take on Scripture to a large degree, with Jungian archetypical language to symbolize the Scriptures. So, in that sense, his work in the Scriptures is pretty anemic. I would say it's very how can I say this? It's very secular to some degree and largely archetypical. Not that it's wrong, but I would say like he doesn't seem to grasp what I would say is larger covenantal theology that I think is really important when it comes to understanding Christian theological framework for Christ's work on the cross and how it applies. But it's not wrong to listen to secular people because what's true is true across the board. And we get accused of that in the Reform camp from time to time because they'll say things like, well, you didn't have a magisterium do things for you that you take as true, right? For instance, like some of the textual critique we might do, right? We'll use scholastic work in things like Hebrew or Greek of people that aren't confessing believers or Catholic or, but it doesn't mean that they're unuseful. They're actually very useful. The people that speak Hebrew in the early days are part of the reason why we have much of our English scripture and translations. So it can be good that way, but I wouldn't.
It might not
wouldn't
be
use
good
it
for
to say-
everybody, though.
No. It's
Yeah,
not. It's
there
not.
might be
No.
there might be plenty
Not
of
good.
people who they don't have the capacity, they don't have the flexibility, they might not even have enough education to be able to distinguish something that just sounds good and something that is really
Exactly.
good and consonant with the
Yeah.
tradition there.
Yeah.
I remember reading 12 Rules for Life, and thinking that if you followed Dr. Peterson's 12 rules, you'd probably be fine.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
they're good.
like,
in here somewhere.
but there was a strange passage that talked about, ancient traditions say that Jesus was a hermaphrodite, and it was like, what?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with any of these. Where did that
Yeah,
come
it's-
from?
Yeah.
And if you're not super well educated and ready to handle these things, then that could throw you for a loop. Whereas, I was most of the way through seminary when I read this, and I was like, that's not right. I
Right.
don't know where he got
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that-
Right.
There was a
Um,
myth somewhere in Mesopotamia that probably or Middle Ages, that something like that came to be.
Well,
But I would say a good rule of thumb, not even a rule of thumb, I would say scriptural rule would be scripture. And when he starts using it, it's meant to be understood in the context of the church, and not in the context of the secular academy,
psychology.
or in the context of psychology. And so that's one of the reasons why it's like something I wouldn't recommend to new or novel believers at all. But if someone had come to Christianity through Peterson, then maybe it might be useful, because it would be maybe a good illustrative tool to walk through the scriptures, or something like that. Would say, well, he says this, well, the church teaches this, and to rightly put it together. But I wouldn't give it to everyone, and I also don't think, in my opinion, I don't think it's useful for the Christian. It's only useful far as understanding what that school of thought is doing. Whether it's apologetics or pastoral ministry, priestly ministry, and helping people. But I don't think it's like somehow required reading for the Christian.
No,
I think you should
no.
pick up Chesterton or someone before you pick up Peterson.
Well,
You know what I mean? Or
it's a
Lewis,
lower
or,
rung on the ladder. It's a
Yeah,
lower step
absolutely.
on the stairs. And I don't know, Bruce, if you caught this, but like I guess Young's had written over the house that he built with his own hands, called or not called, God is present. And I was just like, there isn't a better illustration of middle out thinking than a dopey statement like that. It's so stupid.
I don't even know. Yeah. He's getting. This is like an old. That's an old phrase that he appropriated, I believe. I don't think it means what he says it means.
Well, no, but it's just he gives the Latin. I'm sure the Latin translation's wrong, but like that. But the fact that you would mistranslate the Latin in that way, this is the age of gnosis, middle out thinking problem, like exemplified, by 1,000. It's the same. It's the same sort of like, from my flat world perspective, whether I call God or not, he's still there, and it's like, this doesn't make any sense as a way to speak in the world. Like, you're abusing the language hard at that point. You're all scrambled in your head, and you shouldn't use words that way. It's not healthy.
Could I ask something to Father? Are you familiar with the philosopher Charles Taylor?
Vaguely familiar with him mostly by reputation and hearing him refer. I think he's most famous for this idea of the buffered self, which I think would track along decently with a lot of the stuff that Mark and I talk about a lot, with the age of gnosis. And you could almost think of that buffering between you and reality, as being just a fake and unhelpful understanding of things. So that's and at that we have exhausted my knowledge of Charles Taylor. So
Okay, I asked.
Yeah.
I've heard Peterson reference him, and he wrote a book called The Secular Age. And even though he's not the most, he's not like, I don't know if he's the most famous Catholic philosopher in contemporary times. He's definitely a practicing Roman Catholic who's contributed to Catholic understanding of modernity and political philosophy. And I just wanted to know what the general Catholic community thought of him. But his general thesis seems to integrate very Hegelian notions of subjectivity and the idea that our existence is tied up in communal norms, which are historically derived. So, but all these things are not exactly in line with the most traditional Catholics.
Well, that I'd be very interested to, I don't know, hear what a Dominican thinks about Charles Taylor, a Dominican priest, one of them smarty pants Dominican priests, because they would, I think, represent the tradition that I most resonate with. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know enough about him to say one way or the other. I haven't really read his books. Not sure what he looks like even. So, but yeah, I haven't heard anything, like he's dissenting or heretical Catholic or anything like
No,
that.
he's not. I don't think he's heretical. It's just like
Yeah.
I just don't think most Catholics.
Well, he writes big chunky books too, right? Like
Yeah.
Secular Age is a thick scholarly read, isn't it?
If you
Yeah.
get Catholicism, you don't need any philosophy at all. Like, it's completely unnecessary to your existence.
Well,
We have Thomas
main thing
Aquinas.
No, it's all integrated in. Like, it's all in there. Like, this
Amen,
is the funny
yes.
part. They're all
Oh, we
going
have
like,
the fullness. Yeah.
This
Amen.
guy came up with this, and this guy. It's all integrated in, bro. Like, you
Yeah,
don't.
but
Like, it's
the
already
main
there.
So the main thing Charles Taylor, I think, that would make him controversial among Catholics is, even though he's definitely not like a dissenting Catholic, he's definitely not like a heretical to my understanding. He holds to like orthodoxy. Is he does integrate Hegelian philosophy into his views on community and on subjectivity. And to my understanding, Hegelianism and Catholicism generally don't integrate very well.
Well, it certainly
Hegel was
didn't
a
integrate with
theologian,
me.
not a philosopher, first of all. I don't know why people keep saying this. He was a theologian. You can't be both. You actually got to pick one. He was a theologian. He's a terrible theologian. His theology is awful, and he's a little retarded because some of the stuff he says is a little dumb. And it's obviously dumb, so no one should listen to. Like, this isn't that hard. Like, really. It's not even close to hard. Hegel's retarded. And he's just a bad. You can read Goethe was alive during Hegel's time. You can read what Goethe said about him. The guy doesn't make any sense. That's what he said. Yeah.
I knew you were a zealot, Mark.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Hegel.
Fair. Okay. Why are we talking
No,
about
no,
this
Mark.
idiot?
Mark has no shortage of zeal. Mark has no shortage of zeal. So I have read neither Charles Taylor nor Hegel. I'm a little more interested in Taylor. I've heard that Hegel is probably written in such a way that he's not supposed to be understood properly. That was kind of the style at the time among the Enlightenment idealist types, is that they, I think they intentionally wrote an obtuse style because it made them feel smart or something.
Well, there's a wonderful small book. It's not very big. It might be 120 pages. That's called by R.C. Sproul. He's big in my world. That is called. Yeah, I know. Color Father Eric surprised. But it is one. It talks about. It's called The Consequence of Ideas. And what he does is he does a primer on all of these. Everyone from Socrates and Plato through to Aquinas, through to Bertrand Russell, right? And Hegel is there as well. And it's like a great little book on how this philosophy is not Christian, right? Or what the consequences are of adopting these worldviews. But very small. It's not
I
long.
would probably, if I needed to get to the bottom of Hegel, which I hope I don't, I would probably. I've got the 9-volume History of Philosophy by Father Copleston, which is a legendary work.
It's a big one.
Yeah. So yeah.
But if you just wanted a quick little, like, hey, You know,
Well, he
there's
breaks it
these
down
aspects.
by thinker. Breaks it down by thinker. So
Yeah.
or lack
Yeah.
of thinker, as the case may be. And
It wouldn't
often
surprise me
the-
that someone like Charles Taylor would be Hegelian to some degree, and he's like a liberal intellectual to some degree as well.
I don't know enough. I don't
Yeah.
know enough.
They're all dumbasses. Plato, Aristotle, we're finished. There's no philosophy after that worth a damn. Easy to prove.
I mean, it's all just variations on a theme at that point. Yeah.
Heidegger and Nietzsche, both what Heidegger didn't. I mean, Heidegger admitted it, but Nietzsche never admitted it. But they wrote, "Oh, we can't get past Plato." They wrote it like they knew they couldn't get past Plato. Okay, dude, why are you writing? Shut up. Like, and if you
Just
came
write a
after all these other
commentary on the
wicked smart
Republic.
philosophers, did they get past Plato? Probably not. Then what are we doing here? Why are we sophisting all over the place?
How
and calling it
interesting is
philosophy?
that? Is like some of the oldest guys are like they got to the pinnacle right at the beginning. You know, like how crazy that guy's that thousands of years old, and modern day guys with all the advances of technology still just can't reach the depths of their mind. You know,
No, the world is easy. It's just nobody likes the answer. Like it's
Yeah,
real
I mean, it's-
simple. Nobody likes the
yeah.
answer.
divine simplicity, baby.
Ecclesiastes says it perfectly. There's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
And that's the case.
Well, I mean, I don't think most Christians would like either Nietzsche or Heidegger.
I'm not a fan of either of them. So you're pretty correct
They're not,
there.
not good ones.
Is it the nihilism for you, Father?
No, it's just why would you bother when we have better things to offer?
Amen.
Yeah. That I remember, you know, I was being in philosophy class and we were doing natural theology, right? And what that is what can we know by the light of human reason about God? And this professor's his method, if it wasn't a historical survey class, was always to go from the worst to the best. So we started off with like this Italian postmodern writer. It was just awful. I hated every and I'm like, oh Doc, why do we have to deal with this? And he's like, well,
What's his
you know,
name?
that's where we're at. Gianni Vattimo. It's like it wasn't even like arguments. It was just
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing because we all search for it, and with the amount of secularists in the world, because even before I refound my faith in the secular world, you look for self-help books or those the motivational speakers get all these people because people are striving for this. Like Stoicism, when I was in the secular world, I found it's decent, but then as you said, once you find the richness of the fullness of the faith, there's no comparing it. But it'd be nice to be able to express that to people because your average people, when they're down and out and they look at, and then that's how they get into new ageism, or because they're searching for how do I better myself. But yeah, that's a good point that we have it, but let people more, have them come check it out and get some of those. Yeah, that's a good point.
But you can go either way with that because you're right. Like this stuff does not work. Like something like yes, if you clean your room,
They're all ripoffs of us. Yeah, they take a little
Right.
nuggets. Yeah, they give you a little. Yeah, exactly.
But it can go either way, right? You could go, oh well, we'll just have the material world run everything, and then you're Paul Kingsnorth, and the machine is running everything, and it's incompatible with civilization because Christianity, whatever he defines that as, is incompatible with civilization because I dogmatically ripped a couple quotes out of the Bible, and it's clear that Jesus tells us all to run off in the desert and live that way. And I was like, dude, what Bible you read? Like, I gotta get this translation just so I can check it out, right?
No, it's a really easy thing to fall into, Mark, is you take one little bit of the Bible and you use that
Right.
to explain the rest of it.
Right. Or
It's true.
you can go the other way. You can go the other way and say, no, the materialism isn't giving me the result that I want. And so I need to meditate and maybe do mushrooms because that's kind of the border of materialism. It's kind of materialistic, but then you go see the space elves or whatever the heck it is this week. I don't know. They'll have some new thing that you see next week with those drugs. Don't worry.
Yeah, but that was my point. That if they knew about praying to God, and that would, because the meditating and seeking
They're
these
so
transcendence
far
mindsets.
away. They're so
I
far.
agree. Yeah.
Well,
No, but
it takes
some of them don't know that that's an option.
Well, of course not. Yeah, it takes a
that's-
miracle of grace to bring a person to their knees in submission to
Yeah,
Christ.
That's true.
So, like,
yeah.
when people are searching and looking and clawing at the world for their answers, they'll fall short. And so it's not a position that natural. This is why I kind of disagree with natural theology. Theologies,
Natural
Aquinas,
theology has very sharp limitations on it.
absolutely.
And Aquinas acknowledges that. Yeah.
Yeah, he actually he skirts better than others, I would say, into what I would consider to be better frame. But natural man doesn't really seek after God. It has to be a gracious act, in as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
And so I think that's pretty clear. And so whenever someone comes to God, it's an absolute miracle,
Right.
because they're gonna, like Christ says, right? They didn't believe when a man rose from the dead. I could do all of these signs and wonders, and they'll never believe.
Right.
Mhm.
The sower plants, the sower sows from good soil. It will, like, the seed is planted all over the place, and it's like it's eaten by birds. It's taken by Satan. It withers and becomes worldly. The good soil.
I literally try to think of that every mass when the Eucharist is held up. It's blessed. What he tells Thomas, blessed are you because you were able to see and touch, but blessed are those who aren't able to see and believe.
Mhm.
So that's a good point, Bruce.
But you can see the problem in, like, the Orthodox Church. Like, they've already taken Paul Kingsnorth in, and it was St. Anthony's
they do
feast
that?
day. It's so weird how everything worked out. Is so weird. It's St. Anthony's feast day was
Friday.
Friday. So that's why I was at the church for 6 hours. I was in an Orthodox church for 6 hours, man. I didn't leave.
They let you escape?
They let me escape eventually. They all want me back. I'm like, you got to be kidding. Because I was there yesterday too, and they're all like, you have to come back. And I was like, well, I'll try to come back, but but the thing was, like, Kingsnorth's in that church, and I was talking to the father while he was filling the tub for the baptism there, and he just started talking about St. Anthony because it was the feast day, and we just had our mini feast, and without me even asking, he went into, well, St. Anthony's unique, and that's why he did what he did, and that's why he felt called to do what he did, and that's not for everybody. Like, it's so part of Orthodox thought that a normal conversation of St. Anthony would never go the direction of what Paul Kingsnorth said. But Paul Kingsnorth is in the church, and I'm like, man, the orthos are going to have a problem. They're going to have a big problem with people
That's
like
part
that.
of the trouble with bringing in people who are already kind of famous, is that like, I kind of respect Mark Wahlberg because he's a Catholic and he's like held up as a Catholic personality, and he'll just go there and talk about, like, here's what I'm doing for Lent.
Right.
And it's like, okay, this is Mark Wahlberg level business. He could talk about how he's going to give up YouTube for Lent. He could talk about how he prays with his family, and it's like, it's an appropriate level witness for an actor. And, like, actors are not expected to be properly educated. They're not expected to be pastors. They're just expected to read the lines and emote. And so we don't want to overburden them with those sorts of things. And so when you've got, a public intellectual, it's like, it's really difficult to know what to do with them because a lot of people are going to want to know what to think there. And it's also especially difficult because, he's on his own, let's say, trajectory away from radical environmentalism, but he certainly has a lot of the habits he would have picked up there still
dogmatic.
inside of him. And
He's a fundamentalist.
he's convinced that he's found answers to that. But, he gave a lecture at the First Things Erasmus lecture. So it's not like he was up at the pulpit saying these things. So like the sentence setting does kind of matter. But it's a difficult thing to navigate for him, as somebody who's still going to have his thoughts. But yeah, because of the topic he was talking about, it was he was doing theology, he was doing biblical exegesis there, and yeah, probably not within the main line of the Orthodox Church's thoughts.
Well,
Yeah,
this is my argument with Orthodox folk. I wish they would just admit that they're like me in the Protestant world. There's a lot of disparate things. There's not unity. It's false gerrymandering, as far as I could tell, sectarianism, and so they could be just honest and like I am, and put forth the assertion that denominationalism is biblical, which that has to be my position if I'm going to be at all consistent where I am, and I would say they're just inconsistent. But it's convenient for them to say no, we just we could just draw this line here. See, these people in the line in the circle states are in. Those people are not. It's like you're talking about.
I've met a few Orthodox people on the YouTube landscape. We do panels like this together. I didn't know how much I didn't know about Orthodoxy until I met them, but praise God that in talking with them and joking, obviously Orthodox and Catholic, we mentioned the filioque or the leavened versus unleavened or the papacy, right. And anything that if they would ever throw in a point where they thought that they were right, I would go look it up, and it just actually had me delve deeper into my faith, and it grew stronger. The more like Peter 3:15, the better defenses you have, and just the more that you realize. So that was interesting. But I did notice a few of them, they even amongst a few online people, there is a little sectarians, and they disagree with how this church versus your church versus my church is running or allowing things. And
of course,
I did notice that just in a few people I have, never mind the whole church as a.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, you can get Catholics to argue with each other too. It happens all the time.
Yeah, I know. Yes, this was a little. It was differently. It more sectarian. Yes, I do know what you mean. If you're, but we have a few Catholics, and we're always united in doctrine and beliefs. Whereas that's where they kind of, and we joke, we're like, oh well, as Catholics, we both know what each other believes because we're Catholic.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the appeal. That's to me, that's part of the shared lineage that we have with Catholicism in my camp. We can't have that with the Orthodox because they don't have robust doctrine and dogma well defined as the Catholics do. Also, like the Catholics that we were talking about propositions earlier, and classical Catholic intellectuals, or just I would say even modern intellectuals, are willing to go to bat over particulars, and I think that's important. Whereas Orthodox are not really, and they don't have to. Which leads to, I think, like a relativism of some sort.
Yeah, they don't like the scholasticism of Catholicism. We talk about that. But as you say, we've come up to a lot of that to defend heresies and to kind of make a reason or an explanation of the things that we believe and what's going on to combat heresies. Yeah. So as you said, they'll use the Catholic defenses when it's convenient, but they also do have a very mystical approach to a lot of the things. We don't know. It's mystical.
Right, there's a lot of that there. There's disparate confessionalism. So I mean, I don't want to get into an Orthodox bashing session, but there's a significant amount of lacking there. And also, I think they haven't really come into contact with Western, I guess what you would call dialectic, maybe, or Western discourse the way that we are now.
Western intellectual tradition is probably
Although they do use the New King James Version in the East in English, which I find hilarious. That's the Orthodox Study Bible.
Where do they get First and Second Maccabees from then?
So they have the LXX, the Septuagint for their Old Testament. But it's funny and weird.
There's also a bit of a filter here is that, David, the people that you're talking to are the sorts that hop onto a panel on the internet. And it's not like those are bad people, because here I am hosting, hosting this. And but it's also the case that um, you're going to get a filtering there, and you're going to get a lot of Orthodox folk who like aren't into the doctrinal distinctives. Like they're baptized in a church, they go there, they receive the sacraments, they hear the word preached, everything seems good, and they don't really think about that
Yeah,
the stuff that we talk
good
about over
reminder,
the internet
Father.
here.
Yeah,
So,
good reminder.
so
That is
yeah,
true. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
the thing that
yeah, I think that
I
the
think
point
is
of it is very. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
yeah, the thing that really fascinates me is, as far as I can tell, the Orthodox still think that the Pope is the Bishop of Rome. They
Yes.
haven't they haven't set up an Orthodox Patriarchate of Rome yet. That's a
Correct.
really
Correct.
interesting. Like
Oh,
there's
that is quite I didn't, yeah, I never
right
even
because
thought of that.
we've
Wow.
set up a Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, right? We haven't set up a Latin Patriarch in Constantinople, but we do have a Latin Patriarch in Jerusalem, and it's like,
Oh, wow. I didn't even, that's super interesting. Yes.
It's not
Wow.
going to matter for them as far as that's concerned, though, because if they're at all looking to be consistent with the schism, the popery, generally speaking, is going to be a problem.
It is. It is. I'm not saying that they're ready to, kiss the Pope's shoes and embrace the doctrine of infallibility and papal jurisdiction. But it's just like one of those interesting little things that like just catches in your teeth, and it's just going to keep on bothering you.
I don't know how
Yeah.
that went over my head. I didn't even notice that. And
Yeah.
yeah, in thinking of the two religions, that I
Well,
completely missed that.
I think that there's also like there conveniently found a place in the West where anti-scholasticism has pervaded in the Christian church. It's and when I say scholasticism, that's not a good thing to be in, right? You don't want to be a scholastic. You want to be a Christian. But there's an anti-scholasticism within broader evangelicalism. But like the Shahada, right, in Deuteronomy, and that's what's reiterated in the New Testament. We love the Lord our God with our heart, mind, soul, and strength, including our mind, right? And as Paul states, to like always be renewing your mind. And so, like, we're not Gnostics, right? Like, we don't live in the perpetual spiritual where our faith is 10,000 feet off. We put our mind to work,
Yes. Yeah.
and so we're always having to renew that mind according to what the scriptures reveal. They don't seem to be in that camp, and so they are very popular with that sort of idea that theology and scholastics are not for the church, and that's a common pitfall I think people fall into. The problem with that is if you do that, it's very easy to be enchanted by heresy and cults and all the above because there's no
But you don't
guardrail.
have the dogmas to anchor yourself on, right? Yeah, it's a very useful thing. It's also, there was a lot of bad scholasticism. I remember trying to read some of the Disputationes Metaphysicae of Francisco Suarez, and oh my gosh, that was just awful to read. And it's like they were barely even using English, and so some of it was just like, not all the scholasticism was created good, but Thomas Aquinas is kind of the model of scholasticism, and we hold him up as the model here. So,
I mean, from what I understand, like the Council of Trent brought that forth for you guys. So at the Council of Trent, there's the scriptures and Thomas Aquinas' Summa on the table as that's done side by side.
yeah, there wasn't actually. So there was definitely, Council of Trent ordered the updating of the Vulgate, and actually ordered some lower criticism, some of the textual work to be done to make sure that they had a good edition on it. But the revival of the interest. So when you're at the Council of Trent, there's actually some ambiguous, intentionally ambiguous wording in some of the decrees to say cover both the school of the Franciscans and the school of the Dominicans, right? Because they might have had something differences in how they understood or articulated rather fine points of detail in theology, and the Council of Trent wasn't trying to settle those; it was trying to respond to the Protestants.
Right.
So I don't recall anything about Thomas Aquinas being promulgated at the Council of Trent. The revival in Thomism is mostly a 19th century phenomenon. After a lot of the Enlightenment rationalism had cascaded through, it was Leo the 13th who was kind of the first one. He's very late 19th century. I think he actually bled into the 20th a little bit. He was the one who really promoted Thomistic studies for the church is kind of normative for the formation of priests.
Right. Yeah, I think there was something I'd read about the scholastic something from the 90s. But anyway, it was during the what do they call that session? During the deliberations. Was that Pope Leo the 13th?
Which century are we talking about?
16th century, 15.
That would be like Pius the Fifth was a Tridentine pope, but the popes didn't go to the ecumenical councils for the whole time. So
yeah, I think either it's folklore or there's some particular account. I'd have to find source material that during deliberations the Summa was used even back then.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. It's not like Thomas Aquinas wasn't regarded as an authority during the Council of Trent, but there's this really strange bit of history of the church. It just seems strange to me that, Thomas Aquinas writes the Summa and he's got his scripture commentaries and all of these different things. And then only Dominicans really read it for the next 600 years.
Right.
It wasn't and that's not the way that I was formed. I was formed after the interventions of Leo the 13th and the revival of Thomism in the 19th and 20th centuries, where to the point where Thomas Aquinas and the Blessed Virgin Mary and Jesus are the only people mentioned by name in the Code of Canon Law.
Okay.
So that's because it says, priests are to be educated in the thought of Thomas Aquinas, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a pseudo canonization, but it's not like a full canonization. You wouldn't get excommunicated for saying that Thomas Aquinas overemphasized certain points, and I think it should be this way. You wouldn't get anywhere near excommunicated for that.
Right, sure. But yeah, I think the overall point was basically just that the intellectual pursuit of renewing one's mind is not lost on the West. And I think we should embrace that and not try and get into a relativized position, which goes all the way back to what we were talking about with Peterson, where when you're not in scholastics, you're in symbology, probably, or some version of relativism. And so Peterson's appeal, and I would say orthodoxy's appeal, are those appeals. An appeal to what I would consider to be symbolic aesthetic.
Yep.
And that's why you see that, I think, more today.
Get along. You could do both, I think, the symbolism and the scholasticism.
Amen, Father. Amen.
I think it all fits.
Theology of the Body is a beautiful writing for a pretty modern writing. It's useful. We'll see how it goes. I don't usually judge theological books until they're 100 years past. Then we could see how it actually played out there.
It's fair enough.
That's what Taleb says too. Nassim Taleb talks about that with the Lindy principle and all that.
I'll ask you again in 100 years, Father. What you do?
When John Paul II gave those conferences, those audiences, in 1992 to 1995, something like that. So when I'm over 100 years old, we'll know if theology of the body was any good or not. And that's not me denigrating, papal office. Sense. It's if these things are really more than just something for a short amount of time, the only way to tell that is to go through it for a very long amount of time. There's been all manner of confraternities. There's been all manner of devotions that have sprung up, have flowered, and have passed away in the church because they were fitted for a certain amount of time. And then the landscape changed around it, and the Lord began to do something different. So,
Okay, let me reread that before I go promoting it some more. Then, yeah, thank you for
no.
I didn't know that
Look, it's a part-
confraternities and stuff in there.
Yeah, it's an ordinary magisterium of the Catholic Church. Pope had the authority to do it. He didn't, in any significant doctrinal point, deviate from the tradition. But it's definitely, if you compare the writings of John Paul II with many of the attitudes of the Church Fathers, there's definitely a different emphasis to the way he's
Okay.
writing.
No, thank you for telling me that. I appreciate it. Yeah, I definitely.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, if you find it useful and helpful, then
I thought it was more beautiful how he was explaining the woman, how men and women's bodies should be used. So yeah, that's why I said I'll reread it. Maybe there was some in the end where he was talking about relationships and stuff that I would disagree with, but it was beautiful how he explained.
I'm not talking about like.
Oh, I completely
Like
got what you were saying, Father. I completely picked up what you were putting down. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I do appreciate it. I do. That's why I said I'm going to reread it to make sure before I'm telling people, oh, it's a good writing. Go read it. Let me make sure I feel that's the same way still.
Yeah, and it's also a matter of not all of these things should be for everybody. You know,
Right. That's sort of the bigger struggle in the age of gnosis is people want to think they can know sort of everything, right? And then that will make them equal, right? And equal is good.
And that's all knowledge is of the devil. I think he's tempted Jesus for something similar. You can have it like you don't want that. Wisdom is nice, but all knowledge that's danger.
Right, and they want equality, but they claim to believe in evolution, which that's a contradiction in terms, right there.
Well, monkey men, you talking to monkey men?
Yeah, well, I mean, where do you go with evolution if equality? Like equality would be the end of evolution, so that doesn't let's not hurry that along. Like I don't like that. Their own framework says bad and wrong, and they don't see it. But you know, I mean, what Bruce was saying earlier too, Father. I mean, that goes right in with your, you know, Dr. Peterson is a baby's first symbolism. You know, it's not totally going to.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where we, in the Reformed tradition, depart because we it's not that symbolism is bad or what we might call typology, but the way that it can lead people so poorly astray is just, in some sense, it's puritanical in the way we approach it. It's just, we don't want it. Just like, let's remove that block entirely. Now, to be fair, you can't really remove it because it's everywhere. People are going to do that.
Yeah,
but
it's part of reality.
Just not the way that we would handle
it. The way you were talking about it, Bruce, it's like you need both, right? And the way we were talking earlier, you need the sort of material and you need the spiritual.
Right.
And the problem with needing both is multiple. You know, there's multiple problems with it. One is people want one answer, and it's like, but that's never going to happen. The world is huge. You're not going to get one answer.
You should always stop at a red light unless you shouldn't.
Right. Exactly. It's always right. That was the original example.
Yeah. And also Christ is both divine and human. The scriptures are both divine and human.
But the implication from there's these two things, and you have to be cognizant, we'll say, of both of them. Like, secular language is just the worst ever. Terrible. Right, but what that means is that you're standing between them, mediating now, which means you're working. Like right, and it's almost like you're supposed to bring heaven and earth together or something. I know I heard that somewhere. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
It's the job. I would say it is. Well, and Father Eric would say there's this stuff isn't for everyone, and maybe that is true. But it is the job of the Christian to make his mind renewed so that he can be in both places. There's a old saying that's like, there are some people that are so heavenly minded they're no earthly good.
Yeah. Right.
That's just a bad ditch to fall into.
Right.
And then
the other way around.
the other
And-
way
and
around,
that-
which would be like, Jehovah's Witness or something where you have no divine Christ, right? So
Well,
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah, it's right. I think the misunderstanding is in the hierarchy, in the vertical causality, right? Like there's a place for you. It may not be as high up as you'd like, but there's a place for you, and everyone has a different place that works for them. And that's where everyone gets screwed around because they want this equality, and the equality doctrine or equality dogma that's killing everything because people, and like Peterson's just talking about the hero myth and the hero myth and the hero myth. Again, very useful because I'm like, oh, really? You don't understand how story works at all then? Oh, I understand. I get it now, right? Like you're talking about mythology. That's what he's discussing. Heroes only exist in mythology. There are no hero stories. That's actually an incorrect way of speaking in the English language about what you're talking about. Heroes are all divine, right? Or made through a divine act in literature. Period. End of statement. Like this is literature 101 for real. Like this is so literature 101. I didn't go to college and I got it. Like this is not that hard, right? And then what he's talking about is protagonists and antagonists. And a protagonist, pro, identifies for something, and the antagonist, anti, identifies against. And it's that simple. And those are stories. Stories have protagonists and antagonists, and mythologies have heroes. And Peterson's just horrifically confused between the two things for whatever reason. I mean, I just don't think he understands because he's listening to Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell is very confused about like everything.
So what do you call this modern stuff where they take the antagonist and they empathize with it?
Yeah, right. And then they call him an anti-hero.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And
So they've made two errors, which leads to like 12 immediately. And I'm like, what you're doing can't be made sense of ever, right? Because you're not like there is an order, a sequential ordering, and a hierarchy. Both exist. Not only in myths, but also in stories. Like a story without a hierarchy is what we call a bad story. Because we tend to use fiction and nonfiction, and like I think those are completely invalid categories. Like
I always get it mixed up because like the nonfictions, they're like opposite how they should be in my mind.
They are. No, that's correct. Right.
So I always confuse.
That's exactly correct. They are the opposite of how they should be. That's actually really, really good, David. Yeah.
Because I'm always like, why can I never remember which one I like?
Right. And
Bruce.
think nonfiction should be descriptions only of the material world. And if you like, so manuals, like how to fix your car, that should be nonfiction, right?
Yeah, that's what I always thought. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're talking about a person,
There's going to be a little bit of fiction in there. We gotta
Right,
get this story somehow.
but all fiction is true. Untrue fiction is called a bad story. And it fixes the whole thing right there. Like you can fix the whole thing just like that. It's like
We got to get you
untrue
linked up with
fiction is a bad-
Peterson on a podcast. Set him straight.
That'd be a lot of fun. I would love to see that.
I don't think Mark's personality and Peterson's personality integrate all that well.
Oh, that would go
I think-
viral.
Good.
Cool kid.
Good.
You kidding me?
My personality doesn't integrate with anybody. Deal with it. I don't care.
He's
He's
talking
a
Still
about
gonna be
zealot.
wrong. I'm still going to be an advantage, and you're not going to know it.
Funny story,
Win,
Father
win, win
Eric.
for Mark.
I thought Mark was your co-host here because then the first couple times I saw, and then I ran into his channel and I jumped on, and he said, "No, this is my own channel." I just thought that was funny.
No, Mark is just very loyal. He has many nights kept this stream alive when no one else was bold or bored enough to come onto it. So
Listen, Mark's a nice guy. He can be interesting in how
he's
he
just abrasive and uncompromising. And
Yeah,
those
I
are
mean-
the qualities that God gave him.
Did
And,
you see?
I think
Did
it's
you
better
see
to be.
the new portrait, the new Trump portrait? What do you think that's signaling?
Which one? I haven't.
The
No.
new presidential portrait where
Yeah.
he's basically
That's signaling a deterioration of the nerve muscles in his or
he's
the nervous
signaling
system in his face.
no compromises. That's what he's signaling. My way, no highway. That's what he's
it's a real nice. It's actually great. He and Vance, it's like perfect.
I think there are times when it's better to be loved by other people than it is better to be right.
no,
No,
completely
'cause
false. Total
that's
crap.
that's a false dichotomy anyway. But I would say like Christ came not to bring peace but a sword, because the gospel is divisive, and let the hearer hear. So like the most loving person on the planet ever was Christ, and he was not compromising, and so he
whipped
didn't
people out of the temple with a whip and hit them.
Yeah, so
No hit.
his very people hated him. He wasn't winsome
I
to
think
that degree.
I think happiness can be better than rightness in many respects.
Happiness is evil.
Yeah, I don't even think
Or-
happiness
I
works.
say, yeah, I
It's
tell a lot of
subjective.
people that. I say, God doesn't promise us happiness. He promises joy, peace, hope, and love. And with those, God willing, you'll be happy.
You should
And in
go for
Aristotle, the
contentedness.
word-
And if happiness emanates upon you, then you should be grateful. That's it.
And in Aristotle, the word eudaimonia should not be translated as happiness. And unfortunately, in most English texts, it is. And that means that Bishop Barron and Dr. Peterson can't talk to each other because
Exactly. Because they think they're
Bishop
using
Barron's
the same
trying to
term.
talk about eudaimonia, and he uses the word happiness because that's what he was taught in the. Oh, this is good. Have you seen this yet? That sniped me right there.
Yeah.
In some
Yeah,
ways,
So,
lose more.
Lose more.
Bruce, before we end the stream, I'm dying to know how you think typology goes wrong, because I've
Well,
never heard that before.
Okay, it depends on what aspect we're talking about. But typology only exists so far as you can put it exegesically, as you can do the exegesis from Scripture, preaching the types. Typology goes wrong. I'll just use a good example. Dispensationalists, their whole typology comes through the lens of Daniel, placed on the whole of Scripture.
Mhm.
That's typology gone wrong.
Okay, so it's what happens is you get the canon within the canon approach, where it's like, well, we have to interpret Scripture, and we're going to do the sensible thing, right? The sensible thing. Look out for that. Where we're going to interpret Scripture based on the passages that are more clear, and we'll interpret the less clear passages through that. And what ends up being clear to you is probably something you already agree with and already are thinking about. And then you find that in the Bible because it's a big book and there's all sorts of stuff you can find in it. And that's how you end up interpreting the whole Bible is through, we'll say, it was like we're imagining that Christ is a healer and that it's his identity and that's his primary identity. And you can find Christ doing a lot of healing, right? That's actually not an unimportant part of his identity, but if you like make it the entirety of his identity, then some abrasive and uncompromising passages come up and you say, well, that's not really what Christ meant about that.
I would say good use of typology, because maybe it's easier to say good use versus wrong use. Not apophatic, right? But basically the idea is good use of typology would be seeing how God used and ordained all that came to pass to preach Christ. That's like good typology.
Yeah.
Anything that diverts from that is bad typology. So so what I was kind of going earlier with bad typology, more like bag allegory, I think is better, even more common, I guess. Bad allegory and symbolism as an ism that I think that sometimes I think happens with the Christian life, and people start doing things like, I'm like David, or I am David, and Goliath is in front of me because I have a hard thing to do at my job. You know what I mean? that happens a lot. And then also people that conflate veneration and adoration. And I that's a whole other discussion, but I think it's hard to separate the two. And that happens a lot. So those are the big ones.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Bruce. And thanks all of you for sharing your own unique contributions to this stream. It's been another good one, but it is dark outside. Rational creatures go to bed under such circumstances. So
Good night, Father.
stream's probably going to be late again next week. So sorry about that, but I have duties to my father that I'm helping him attend to, and it's going to make the world a better place. So good night, and God bless you all.
You
God
too.
bless.